Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment we're going to begin the funeral services of Mr. Jack Rosenberg. Rabbi Victor Weisberg from Temple Bethel, Northbrook will be officiating. We're humbled and honored to have representatives from the United States Navy for military honors, which will begin shortly.
When you call on the speaker, will I be able to use this?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then you'll...
And you'll tie the recording.
Okay. And you'll have a seat or whatever you want.
I'm going to sit down.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, yeah.
At this time, we're going to begin with military honors.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for having us today. It's our great honor to be here. Those who have served are encouraged to render him a final salute during the playing of taps. On behalf of the President of the United States, a grateful nation, and a very proud Navy, please accept this flag in recognition of his honorable and faithful service to our country. Thank you for having us today. It was an honor to be here.
And now we continue with the funeral service.
I'd like for you to come close. Come in, come in. Adonai ma'adam vateda'ehu, ben enosh vatchashvehu. Adam lahevel damav, yamav k'tseil over, b'boker yatzitz v'chalaf, ula'erev yomoleo v'yavesh. Tashev enosh ad daka vatomer shuvu v'nei adam. Lu chochmu yaskilu zot, yavinu la'achritam. Ki lo b'moto yikach hakol, v'lo yered acharav kavodo. Shmar tam u're'ei yashar, ki acharit le'ish shalom. Podeh Adonai nefesh avadav, v'lo yeshmu kol hachosim bo. The psalmist asks a question. O Lord, what is man that thou takest knowledge of him, or the son of man that thou makest account of him? Man's life is so brief compared to the creation of the world and so much that surrounds us. And so his answer is, man is like unto a breath. His days are as a shadow that passeth away. In the morning he flourisheth and groweth up, and in the evening he is cut down and withereth. Thou turnest man to contrition, and sayest, Return, ye children of men. O that they were wise, and would consider their latter end. For when man dieth, he shall carry nothing away, but his glory shall not descend after him. Now, in the King James edition of the Bible, very poetic, they translate the Hebrew word kavod as glory. And it's the most theological word in the entire scripture, because we meet it when when Moses first comes down from Mount Sinai and he sees what's going on around the golden calf. It's X-rated, so we won't go into it. And he smashes the tablets out of anger. And then he comes to his senses and he feels, wow, I really messed up. I've been up there 6 weeks, and these people, formerly slaves, now liberated, don't know what to do, leaderless, and they fell back in their old idolatrous Egyptian ways. This is a terrible beginning. And in the 33rd and 34th chapters of Exodus, this is where you meet this story, there's this magnificent dialogue between God and Moses. It's just a beautiful thing about a person in all his failed humility facing his Lord and Master and admitting that he just missed the whole boat. And God says, that's why we know he's Rahum, he's merciful. I want you to go up the mountain a second time. And Moses is recalcitrant. He really feels that God has lost faith in him. And God keeps imploring him. And Moses says, let me see thy face. And God says, no man can see my face and live, but I will cause all my kavod to pass before thee. This word that King James translates as glory. And then there follows 2 verses that we recite liturgically only 5 times out of the year. When we stand before the open ark, before we take the Torahs out, we say this verse. Adonai, Adonai, Eo Rachum v'chanun, Erech Apayim v'rav chesed ve'emet, Notzer chesed la'alafim, Nosei avon v'fesha v'chata'a v'nakeh. And these are called, in Aramaic, the Shlosha Shrei Midayah, at the end of the Passover service when we sing Who Knows 1, 13, Who Knows 13. Okay. God is, at this very moment, God is present right here and now. And God has that ability, if we invoke his presence, to be present in our life regardless of where we are and what we're doing, if we are conscious of being in his service. God is mighty. God is powerful. And if anybody has ever felt empowered, felt that something stronger than our own personality is urging us on, and we just have to keep going, we should appreciate that comes from the source which we call divinity. When people just reach out to us and give us that encouragement that allows us to keep going, it's not just flesh and blood, it's something infinitely stronger and much more lasting. God is merciful. God is kindly. God is gracious. God is true. God is patient. God is loyal. God forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin, and grants pardon. And those are the 13 attributes of faith. And it's not that I'm a great translator, but I'm sure that most of us understand most of those words. We understand what faithfulness and kindness and forgiveness and sympathy and encouragement really are. But please understand, they're not just human attributes. Those are attributes that display our divinity. They display our humanity. They display something that makes us much higher than the flesh itself. And each of us can emulate that because many of us have been aided throughout. We get in trouble, somebody forgives us, allows us a second chance. Those things are not easy to come by, and we should remember them and emulate them when we have that chance to bear witness to this divinity that shapes our end. Mark the perfect man, and behold the upright, for the end of that man shall be peace. The Lord esteemeth the souls of his servants, and none of them that trust in him shall be forsaken. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have this little folder, I think it's on the inside or the back side, the 23rd Psalm. Okay, and it's called the Psalm of David, but traditionally all the Psalms are Davidic. However, this Psalm, which is divided sharply into the first 3 verses where God is addressed in the impersonal, is when David really isn't always in need of God's guidance, protection, and inspiration. And the second half is when David is alone in what we call the Valley of the Shadows, which is a real place in Israel. It's called the Emek HaElah, the Valley of the Pistachio Tree. And it's an S-shaped valley. And if you stand someplace in the middle, you can see the Mediterranean on this side and the hills of Judea on this side. And David was facing Goliath, the gigantic foe, and he was a little fellow with only 5 little pebbles from the brook. But he felt that God was with him and gave him the power to overcome his fear and to prevail. Let's recite together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Pause. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me, this proximity. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I'd like to call on David. Beth, are you going to come forward? Just David? Okay.
Beth and I collaborated on this with assistance from Dan, Cindy, Abby, Molly, Carly, Laura, Ethan, and Jacqueline. Dad led a remarkable life, a 94-year journey from small-town roots to the major leagues, one filled with the love of family and friends and the desire to help others. From young people just starting out to CEOs and presidents, from ushers at the ballpark to Hall of Fame ball players, from people needing help to physicians saving lives, he had a kind word for everyone. He knew no strangers and greeted people with a sincere smile and a genuine interest in hearing their stories, in turn offering stories of his own and words of advice and encouragement, asking if there's anything he could do to help them out. He was an outstanding writer, lively and wise, with a great sense of humor. He always believed in going the extra mile for others. When we commented to him about his generosity, he told us it was the right thing to do. The more he gave out or did for others, the more came back to him. Dad was born at home in 1926 in the family apartment above the Sam Rosenberg General Merchandise Store on Court Street in Pekin, Illinois. He was the youngest of 3 children, born to Samuel and Molly Rosenberg. Dad and his siblings, Leonard and Rosella, had 50 first cousins, about equally distributed on the Rosenberg and Levy sides of the family. He attended Pekin Community High School, where he was the only Jewish student and was elected student council president. He was on the Pekin High tennis team and also played in the Nationals. He began his media career at age 16 when he applied to the Pekin Times, where publisher F.F. McNaughton had heard about the student council election. He worked his way up, and Mr. McNaughton soon contended he was the youngest sports editor of a daily newspaper in America. He enlisted in the Navy at age 17, and one night, 3 weeks after graduation in 1944, he was among 15 classmates who left for boot camp at Great Lakes. After returning from World War II in 1946, he took college classes and resumed his newspaper career in Pekin. One day, Mr. McNaughton asked him why he didn't write his articles at home instead of coming back to the newsroom late in the evening or early in the morning. Dad explained he couldn't afford a typewriter at home. Mr. McNaughton told him to pick out any typewriter he wanted to purchase. Mr. McNaughton would buy it, and Dad could work it off, with a portion, $10, deducted for every week he worked at the Pekin Times until it was paid for. The Royal Standard manual typewriter he selected cost $140 in 1946, and he used it and treasured it his entire life. He eventually became a sports writer for the Peoria Journal-Star, where he won top NCAA awards for best college baseball reporting. On the side, he even wrote an advice to the Lovelorn column for the paper, under the byline H. Stephen Grayson. His dream job since 5th grade was to cover sports for the Chicago Tribune, but when he ultimately was offered the job at age 27, he reluctantly turned it down because the $100 a week salary wasn't enough for him to also support his widowed mother. The sports editor told him everyone starts at $100 a week, though he promised to look for a workaround in the coming months. In the meantime, another opportunity arose, this time with the broadcasting arm of Tribune Company, an offer from announcer and Peoria native Jack Brickhouse to work with him at WGN Television and Radio at $85 a week. Timing is everything, and Dad decided to take the job in January 1954, producing and writing as part of one of the greatest sports departments ever. As sports editor of WGN, he covered the Cubs, White Sox, Bears, Big Ten, and other teams with many of the greats, on air and behind the scenes. The speedy clack of Rosie's portable typewriter in the background during Cubs broadcasts was part of the soundtrack of summer. He would hang around dugouts, clubhouses, and front offices before games, gathering anecdotes to feed to the announcers throughout the broadcast. He was involved in some broadcasting firsts. In April 1961, he arranged Vince Lloyd's interview with President Kennedy on the leadoff man before the White Sox-Washington Senators opener, the first time a sitting president was interviewed live during a Major League Baseball game. In 1962, he was part of the team bringing the first transatlantic telecast to Europe, the early moments of a Cubs-Phillies game. In 1981, he went with Jack Brickhouse to interview former baseball announcer and then President Ronald Reagan at the White House. When they got to the executive mansion, they were told they had to do an actual 2-minute drill. A Reagan aide said Brickhouse had just 2 minutes because the president had an ambassador waiting in another room. Our dad said, "Sir, with all due respect, if you could get 2 old sports announcers to hold it to 2 minutes, God bless you." The aide really laughed, and Reagan went 11 minutes. Years later, he co-authored the book, Thanks for Listening, a look at Jack Brickhouse's 50 years in broadcasting, and helped expand Tribune radio networks. One of his biggest career highlights was writing Jack Brickhouse's speech for induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown on July 31, 1983, as a recipient of the Ford C. Frick Award for Broadcasting. The entire speech was 3 minutes. It began with, "I feel at this moment like a man who is 60 feet 6 inches tall," and included the memorable line, "In the fantasy of my dreams, I have imagined myself as the announcer of a Cubs-White Sox World Series, a series that would last 7 games, with the final game going to extra innings before being suspended because of darkness at Wrigley Field." He later continued with, "The trains, the planes, the cabs, the buses, they have carried me millions of miles through the years to get me to where I most wanted to be, the ball game. A reporter told me once that even if I didn't make it to Cooperstown, my suitcase probably would. Fortunately for me, we arrived together." He wrapped it up with a general thank you to countless people, lest anyone be forgotten, with, "You know who you are, and you have my undying gratitude. Here, on a memorable afternoon in Cooperstown, my heart tells me I have traveled the 90 feet from third to home and scored standing up." The many career accomplishments came second to his love of his family. He met the love of his life, Maora Gitlitz, in late 1955 at a singles party. They married 4 months later, on February 5th, 1956, after he gave Mom the choice of getting married before or after the baseball season. They were happily married for 51 years before her death in 2007. As Dad said many times, if I were coming down the road again, I'd pick the same one. Our parents bought their house in Lincolnwood in 1962. It was a great place to live, and neighbors became part of our group of close friends. The 4 Chicago newspapers were delivered each day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Our parents enjoyed reading, visiting, and card games with family and friends in the living room on Kilpatrick Avenue, often with WGN radio or big band music playing in the background. The paneled basement rec room featured a ping pong table, Dad's office and typewriter, and walls filled with photos and memorabilia from his career. Even with a busy career and 7-day weeks on long homestands during the summer, he found time to be at Little League games, watch Beth's tennis matches, and take me to play golf. Our parents hosted a large Seder each year on the first night of Passover, generally with about 40 guests. The Seders were legendary, not only for the wonderful brisket my mom prepared, but also for the welcoming atmosphere and our parents' willingness to always make room for one more if they heard someone needed a place to go. Dad would lead the Seder, making sure everyone had a part to read, though calling on guests at random to make sure they were paying attention as we read through the Haggadah. We enjoyed many family gatherings in Lincolnwood, Chicago, and Peoria with the Rosenberg side of the family that included Scrabble with our cousins and Grandma Molly. When I married Cindy and Beth married Dan, he immediately and often told people he now had 4 children. He was excited when the grandchildren arrived and so very proud of each of them. As he liked to say, they all look like Grandpa. He was there for B'nai Mitzvah, graduations, musicals, recitals, concerts, sporting events, and award ceremonies, as well as plenty of Grandpa time asking questions, telling stories, and imparting advice and wisdom to the next generation. He loved nothing better than to type a note to the grandkids, once writing as the Tooth Fairy to tell about his assistant Hazel Orthodontisberg, with the advice, be true to your teeth or they will be false to you. Or writing to one at camp after learning about her cabin's Golden Broom Award, noting, your accomplishment may not be as important as the Nobel Peace Prize, but it's significant nonetheless. He also loved to call early in the morning and sing to his children and grandchildren on their birthdays. He had a good singing voice and could carry a tune. Every year on Beth's birthday, Dad called her early to retell the birthday story. Beth was born in the wee hours of April 14, 1959, and soon after, Dad headed to Comiskey Park for opening day for the White Sox. Before the game, he told Sox starter Billy Pierce that his daughter had been born that morning, and if Billy pitched a winner, Dad would share the story each year. Pierce came through with a 2-0 6-hit shutout of the Kansas City Athletics, and the Sox went on to win the pennant. Dad even called Billy Pierce on Beth's 50th birthday to remind him of the story. Dad retired in 1999 to devote more time to helping his beloved Mayora. When she needed more care than he could provide at home, he'd visit her 3 times a day, whether at the nursing home or hospital, to look out for her, saying she would do the same for him or even more. He made friends everywhere he went. One time, he even led an impromptu first-night Seder in Mom's hospital room when the patient in the other bed and her daughter turned out to be Jewish. Dad served on the faculty board of directors at Swedish Covenant Hospital, where he received the hospital's Spirit of Compassion Award in 2012 and helped raise funds to create the Mayora Rosenberg Women's Health Center in 2014. We are all so proud of the honor bestowed on Mom, who was a great social worker whose interest in helping others led to her career as a premier caseworker and supervisor at the Cook County Department of Public Welfare. Dad visited Swedish Hospital and the Women's Health Center specifically on a regular basis thereafter, stopping by to see how things were going and thank everyone there for all they did to help women in the community. He was a member of Temple Bethel of Northbrook for almost 60 years, involved with the Jack Quinlan Memorial Golf Tournament to raise money for the Chicago Boys and Girls Clubs, received the B'nai B'rith Centennial Hall of Fame Award for community service in 1968 in front of a busload of friends and family at Chicago Stadium. Threw the first pitch at Wrigley Field in 2007, was given the key to the village of Lincolnwood in 2011, was a Silver Circle inductee in the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Chicago in 2011, received the Broadcast Pioneer Award from the Illinois Broadcasters Association in Bloomington in 2012, and in 2017, his name was added to the WGN Radio Walk of Fame. In 2015, I had the privilege of accompanying Dad and other veterans on Honor Flight Chicago to Washington, D.C. Dad and the other World War II heroes received a well-deserved ovation upon returning to Midway Airport, and family and friends were thrilled to be there to cheer. In 2013, he began corresponding with Tom Hanks over a mutual affinity for typewriters. After seeing a newspaper article about the actor's collection, Dad typed a note sharing how he learned to type from Miss Kemp in high school. Accuracy first, speed second was her rule. The story of how he acquired the trusty Royal Standard and how he typed human interest notes and fed them to Cubs and White Sox announcers to weave into the telecasts. He was delighted to hear back with Tom's typewritten letter asking whether Dad's $140 typewriter was gold-plated, because in 1946, that was a lot of dough. In his later years, he would hold court at his favorite restaurants, including Elwood's, Portillo's, and Graziano's. Even in his 80s and 90s, he remained young at heart. Wearing his blue Navy World War II veteran cap and Cubs jacket, or sometimes White Sox jacket, he was a familiar face and shared stories with friends or the regular staff. Dad returned to Pekin a few times in recent years. When we were in nearby Peoria to celebrate our Aunt Anne's milestone birthdays, groups of Dad's children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews accompanied him to visit the site where Dad was born. See the Pekin Times and some of his schools, including Washington Junior High, where he sank the winning basket in overtime and was carried off the court on the shoulders of his teammates. And to hear his stories. One time we located the house where the Rosenberg family lived in 1930 when Dad was 4. When he introduced himself to the longtime owner on the driveway, she recognized him and welcomed us in for a visit, stories, and tour of the home. During the past few years, Dad shared stories about his idyllic boyhood in Pekin and worked with Beth on her genealogy research about the Rosenbergs. He was fascinated when she found the ship's record from his father's arrival at Ellis Island in 1907 from Russia. We're grateful to the countless people who have had an impact on our dad through the years. Family, friends, co-workers, those he's helped, and those who have helped and cared for and about him. It's been said that memories are the only things we really own. In 1970, after the death of his mother, Dad received a letter on Pekin Times stationery. It was from Mr. McNaughton, who wrote, "The words most full of trust that I ever heard directed to God were spoken by Jack Rosenberg's mother. My wife Seal and I had gone with Mrs. Rosenberg to see Jack off to war. We stood together on the platform of the Illinois Central Railroad. Then the moment of departure came. Your mother, Jack, did not ask the conductor to keep an eye on you, nor had she asked the general to watch over you during dangerous days ahead. No, she said, God, take care of him. Never before, nor since, have I heard a person speak to God as though she knew him. God, take care of him. Now you have wonderful memories of a wonderful mother." Dad spoke of that letter in his stories and kept it for more than 50 years. Now Cindy and I, Beth and Dan, Abby, Molly, Carly, Laura, Ethan, and Jacqueline all have wonderful memories of a wonderful father and grandfather. Echoing the sentiment of Grandma Molly, spoken 76 years ago, God take care of him. We love you, Dad.
Beautiful, David. Erst will ich suchen a poor Werther. That's how Jack got Mayora. He spoke Yiddish on a limited basis, and I do too. But I want to compliment both Beth and David and their wonderful spouses and their great children for appreciating this man's presence in their life. And I think David, and if you missed the notice in the Tribune, I think it was yesterday, it's the longest one I've ever read, and it covers the subject beautifully. So Rabbi, what do you got to say? Well, I'll tell you. Behind Jack's wonderful stories were a group of values that were of ultimate importance and of infinite value. One of Jack's stories that he used to tell me, we became friends when I heard he was from Pekin, and I said, "Oh, you're a chink." Okay, now that's passé because of proper speaking. Now we talk about the Pekin, I think the Jaguars and Dragons, okay, they koshered this whole thing. But we laughed when we talked about the Chinks because I used to follow Illinois high school basketball because of Collinsville and all these little towns that had Hebron and all these towns that had great basketball players, and it was part of our relationship. But Jack used to tell the story of when he was a boy preparing for his bar mitzvah, that his father every Sunday would make him a Hebrew. He would cross the river into Peoria and study for his bar mitzvah with the gentleman. Every Sunday he would go with his father, and the father would walk around town waiting for Jack to come through. And he was very proud of Jack, and Jack remembered that story, and it's a symptomatic story because Jack was a very, very proud Jewish member of the tribe. He was very proud of who he was, and we were very proud of everything that he represented because those values were 24 karat. If it was about truth, it was about goodness, it was about understanding, it was about reaching out to people regardless of their station. You heard David say he interviewed this president and that president and this member of the Baseball Hall of Fame and all these, Billy Pierce. You know, I'm from Cleveland. I still remember these people and worshipped at the altar of Lou Boudreau. Oh, he played shortstop for the Indians, which now has a new name. Okay, it's like the Chinks, went all the way of all flesh. But the fact is that Jack recalled all these people, and they made an imprint on his life. And I've had lunch with him on countless occasions, or I was with him in the Swedish Covenant Hospital, just sitting there and watching him treat people. And I'm not talking about opening his purse to treat people. I'm talking about reaching out to give them a good word, a smile, finding something good to say about them in every regard. This was so about the nurses at Swedish Covenant. He was having trouble with his legs. Bethy was in the hospital. We were watching this tall nurse came, and she felt blessed by his patience, understanding, and gratitude in the midst of pain and discomfort, that he had time to chuck all those things and reach out to people and show them his appreciation and their honor and regard. And you know, that goes a long way. The kids yesterday were talking about the fact that Richie Allen, who was had a temperamental problem, but Jack one day thanked him for an interview, and Richie Allen, who's a star player, Richie Allen got off his high horse and said, "You're the first person that ever thanked me for anything." Now, you know, to live life unappreciative is a tragedy, okay? You know, if you have parents who think, well, you'll never learn how to spell, you'll never learn how to add, you'll never amount to anything, is the wrong thing to tell a child, okay? Because they love you, they think you love them, and you think you're telling them the truth, and it spoils a lot of dreams. And Jack was not a spoiler of dreams. Jack was an initiator of step after step up the ladder of joy and happiness and value. He even lied about me. I mean, it was, I'm an Adlerian psychotherapist, so we don't talk about therapy, we talk about encouragement. And Jack was the epitome of encouragement. This was his métier. Whatever, I mean, he would introduce me as his rabbi, and then say all kinds of glorious things, which I dared not believe, for God's sake. Okay. But it felt good anyway. And when I told my wife, she said, "You're back home now, forget it." So pick up the dish towel and do your stuff. But that was Jack. He saw good in everybody, and he brought out good in everybody. And you know, living at a time when we see journalists who find fault with everything and everybody and every word and every deed, we should appreciate that that's not a way to bring unity in a community or in a country. And Jack was a person who built that sense of community, whether it was at a radio station, whether it was at a spring tryouts for the big leagues, whatever it was, Jack was always there, and he remembered there was good, and he remembered to bring it forward. Now, why do I say all these things after you've heard what David and Bethy presented here, which was wonderful, by the way? I could have listened for much longer. And yesterday I suggested to both of them that when the weather mitigates and you all gather at sometime in May or something, that we'll sit down and review an oral history of this fellow that we want to record. And the reason we want to record it is because there are those of us who still can learn how to be better because of Jack Rosenberg. There are those of us who still appreciate a good word, a good friend, a generous thought, a kind expression. And you saw from those little things, he knew how to turn a phrase. He knew how to turn a phrase that made us feel, wowie, he really cared. And you know what? He really cared. I want to say a word about Meora, because I had the privilege of visiting, the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is visiting the sick. And when Bethy called me about this last bout with Jack, and I just wanted to go there. Okay? And give him a good word, okay? And, I've been heckled by better. So the fact is that we were just not allowed. We were just prohibited. And the beginning of the Torah says, Lo tov heyot ish levado. It's not good for a man to be alone. Lo tov heyot ish levado. And he deserved to be present to bear witness to the love of so many who cared for him and whom he cared for. These values that he had, that he learned from immigrant parents, okay, that he displayed wherever he was, whether it was the only Jewish boychik in Pekin's high school or in the Navy. I was in the Navy too. We had to make our way. We were in camps where people had never seen Jews before, okay? Wanted to know where our tail was, where our horns were, where our yellow streak was, all these kinds of things. And they had to learn who we were, how we respected ourselves, when we went to services, why we were willing to take on dirty jobs, why we were willing to serve because we believed deeply, why we wanted to bear witness to who we were. And Jack was a true witness of what not only a sterling character represents, but somebody who portrayed that in every station that he served at and with everybody whom he met, whether it was the humblest person or whether it was the most prestigious person. Jack always treated them with infinite respect and show them their highest worth, their highest worth. And you know, to have bathed in that glory is a very great gift. It's not just a passing thing. We should cherish it and remember it. And when we do it for others, we should do it lishmo, in his name, so that he will appreciate and live on. Okay? Ha'omer b'shem omro mevi shalom le'olam. The one who says it in the spirit of those who taught it to us brings peace to the world. And that was Yaakov ben Shmuel, a wonderful Jewish father, grandfather, husband, friend, role model, leader, bon vivant in every way. And you know, one last story. We were preparing for one of the kids' B'nai Mitzvah, and Jack said, "You've got to come to the party. You've got to come to the party. I'm going to sit you with Brickhouse and Boudreaux and Lloyd." Okay. I knew Boudreaux. The rest of them didn't matter to me. But he always made it so that you were honored in his presence, that we felt honored because he reached out and made us feel bigger and better than we believed. And because we felt that, we strived for it. I'm not sure that we always succeeded, but we got Jack to be our cheerleader wherever he is and whatever he's doing. May his repose be peace. Hi nishmato baruch. Amen. It's time to blow my nose and then we'll continue. Almighty God and compassionate Father, in whose hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh, as we gather to pay a fond farewell to beloved father and grandfather and relative and friend and role model and a man of values who expressed and personified them in such a high way. We thank thee for all that was good and true in his life and all that remained sweet and inspiring in his character. Love dies not, and righteousness is mightier than the grave. And they that walk uprightly among men and sow seeds of truth and loving kindness live on an everlasting remembrance. Help us that through our own deeds and thoughts and words, we can continue to reflect honor upon Jack, who was so dear to us in life, and loyally to cleave to the faith which he represented so beautifully. It's in that spirit that we ask you to rise for the Kaddish. The Kaddish is, yes, it's on the back page. The Kaddish is in Aramaic, by the way, even if it's written in Hebrew. And it's not a prayer for the dead. It's a prayer that in the presence of the mystery and the loss of such love, that we can continue to consecrate our lives to those high values that we appreciated in others. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, b'yoma divrach hirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayei chon uvyomei chon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv, v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach, li'olam ul'olmei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shemei dekudisha b'richu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush birchata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'olma, v'imru amen. Yehei shloma Rabbah, min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. And now this prayer is called the El Mole Rachamim, and it was written in 1096 to remember the martyrs of the First Crusade. The Crusaders marched through the Rhineland and rioted and killed Jews wherever they found them. And the Jewish people in the 3 Jewish settlements of the Rhineland, Worms, Mainz, and Speyer, lost everybody and had to put their own children to death rather than see them taken by the Crusaders. And when they asked Rashi, the famous rabbi, can we continue to believe in God with all this pain and anger and this unrighteousness? And Rashi wrote his famous commentary to the Song of Songs, which is a love song between God and Israel. And even in our deepest mourning, we say God is full of compassion. El mole rachamim shochein bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kadoshim utahorim, kezohar harakeya masivim, et nishmat Yaakov ben Shmuel, ve'et nishmat Meora Rosenberg, ve'et nishmat Albert Gitlitz, ve'et nishmat Esther Gitlitz, ve'et nishmat Frida Schrager, ve'et nishmat Maury Schrager, ve'et nishmat Joseph Schrager, ve'et nishmat Lucille Schrager, ve'et nishmat Yisrael Schrager, ve'et kol haneshamot hanishkavot po. Ana balarachamim yasti rehem besetek nafav v'olamim. V'yitzror hachayim et nishmotehem. Adonai hu nachalatam. V'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkavam. V'nomar Amen. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering cover of thy wing, to the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, to the soul of Jack Rosenberg, Meora Rosenberg, Albert Gitlitz, Esther Gitlitz, Frida and Maury Schrager, Joseph and Lucille Schrager, and Israel Schrager, and all those who lie here enshrined in this hallowed ground. May their souls ever be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Be thou their possession, and may their repose ever be peace. And may the Father of peace send peace to all who mourn, and comfort with his love all the bereaved among us. V'nomar Amen. And now we're going to continue with the burial. Okay? David, continue. Hold on, I'll get out of your way.
Ladies and gentlemen, the gentlemen from the cemetery are going to place the cover of the vault. And then for those of you who wish to come forward to place earth into the grave, it's customary to place 3 measures of earth. We have the little cups. Also, please note the memorial contributions, Swedish Covenant, the Mayor Rosenberg Women's Health Center, the Swedish Hospital Foundation. In just a moment, we are going to turn off the volume, but we'll keep the live stream going. And for those of you who need information about the charity that are live streaming, by the way, the family should know there are over 100 screens watching. 100 screens, that's a lot of people. But we'll turn off the volume, and then shortly after the earth is placed, we'll form a shura, a double aisle, and his son and daughter will walk through, and it's at that time the rabbi will offer words of consolation. Thank you for those of you who are joining us. Yes.
The oldest and the largest Jewish cemetery, and according to rabbinic tradition, those who are buried on the mount or from the mount will rise first when the Mashiach comes, and we want to afford as many people as possible, and especially my friend Yanko. Hashiva po, v'lo yir kol chamato, hamelech yanenu b'yom korenu. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we are going to turn off the live stream. Thank you for joining us. May everybody try to be safe and healthy.